Yeah, welcome everyone. So we're starting actually from the last slide, which is not what I intended. Okay, so let's do it like this. That looks better. So first of all, thanks for joining everyone. And I'm going to get rid of the little window here, so nobody will be seen on the recording. So today we're going to talk about anxiety, and especially anxiety in perimenopause, and why actually do we have increased anxiety in perimenopause and also in menopause. So first I wanted to, for those who don't know me, I wanted to quickly introduce myself. So I'm a native German. I do live in Belgium at the moment, or I have been actually in the past 12 years. So I've been traveling a little bit all over, and I do love traveling. I'm a nature person, always been passionate about nature and trying to find ways, alternative ways to heal my body other than synthetic drugs or yeah. And my own health journey has also led me to actually go back and study nutritional therapy. So that's how I came to get my certification as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner with the NTA Association in the US. And I then did further trainings with the restorative wellness solutions, where I now hold the final and master level degree. So, and I do dedicate my practice today in working mainly with women. And I really want to help women in midlife who are in this perimenopause and menopause phase, to help them balance the hormones, because I do find that this is a really great time in our lives, or it can be, and it can actually be so debilitating if we're suffering from all these hormonal imbalances. And if we don't, then it could actually be the best time of our lives. So this is really what I want to help women with. And I have been personally struggling with migraines most of my life. And so that's also why I really put a focus there. And it's also something that is one of the symptoms of perimenopause again, and it can sometimes come back or come up again in this time. But enough about me. Let's talk about anxiety. So what I have prepared for you today is looking at general root causes for anxiety, and you may know most of them or some of them. We'll see. And then we'll talk about why it actually gets worse when our hormones get out of balance. And lastly, I will propose some solutions how to improve your anxiety, feelings of anxiety naturally. And part of it is also hormone balance. All right. So what is anxiety? I mean, I never thought I was anxious. I always associated anxiety with fear. And I mean, it is a sort of fear, but I was like, no, I'm not scared. I mean, I'm brave, you know, I'm traveling everywhere. I'm not scared of most things. So, but I never actually considered anxiety to be like just a feeling of worry or overthinking or being nervous. And when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, maybe I do have anxiety. And I mean, we probably all experience this to one point, but when it comes more pronounced and when it becomes maybe the most of the time, it can become like a nervous disorder, and yeah, and it can even lead to panic attacks as well. So So I don't know about you. I mean, those who are there with me live today, maybe you want to type in the chat. I mean, how does anxiety manifest for you? Where do you feel it in your body? Because that's also different, right? I mean, for me, I can feel like when I get anxious, I get this kind of tight feeling in my chest, for sure. And it kind of, I think it's also important to kind of feel into your body and kind of know what's going on and understand like what basically what symptoms also to look out for, so you can at that moment that you understand what you need to give your body so that you feel better, right? So I don't know if if you want to share, just type it in the chat and I will have a look at it, and otherwise I will continue. So what are the root causes of anxiety? And there can be so many different ones, but the main one is really stress. And stress can be so many different things, right? But stress can be emotional and physical. And then there's also some type of trauma, or maybe losing a loved one, or just a moment. Yeah, Alma says she's also feeling in her chest and joint pain. Yeah, I do think that joint pain is a sign of inflammation, and it can also be, it can increase when we have low estrogen, actually. Yeah, definitely in the chest as well. Tracy says, and stomach, breathlessness. Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's also how I experience it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, guys. So basically, as I said, stress is really one of the main root causes for anxiety, and you probably know this. But then and then you're stressed when you have a lot going on at work, if you have deadlines to meet, if you're worrying maybe about a financial situation, if you have bills to pay, and you don't have enough savings. I mean, those are all things they're really stressful for us, right? But I mean, for me personally, it was also just driving to work every day and sitting in traffic every morning. That was just a really high stress for me, and that's really personal. I think not everyone gets affected by these things so much, but some people do, and then some people don't. So that's really important, I think, to kind of know what's causing you stress, and then kind of looking into how can you is there a stressor that you can actually get rid of, or can you maybe go by bus or take the metro to work instead of driving and sitting in traffic? Would that be less stressful for you? So I mean, those are little things that you could consider, right? But what I also see with clients is also the older we get, the more trauma we also carry with us. And just a woman giving birth to a child, that can actually be a big traumatic experience, and we may actually not think that it was like a trauma. I mean, we want to think like, it's beautiful and it's basically giving birth to a child, but it's a big shock, like a physical trauma that actually our body is going through. And many women actually carry it, mainly in their lower belly, or basically they carry this in their body. And it's really important to also get into these things and work with therapists that are specialized in releasing these kind of trauma. So that's also very important, especially if we're feeling we're not really getting better in these things. But then what also can play a huge role in anxiety is actually, you might be surprised to hear that, is your gut health. So just imagine this, you know, your microbiome with all its bacteria and everything that's living in it is having, I mean, there's a direct connection to your brain via the vagus nerve that kind of starts here, and your vagus nerve goes all the way. It's the longest nerve in your body. It goes all the way through your digestive tract, and basically that's how our brain is communicating with our gut all the time. And if you have, if your microbiome is not balanced, if you have bad bacterial overgrowth, or you have parasites, for instance, you know, just imagine this constant chatter that's arriving in your brain. So it's really actually stressing out your brain, because there's this constant signaling going on with the messaging. And then also what can happen is if 80% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. So you might know this, or for those who have followed my presentations before, or have done workshops with me, you've heard me say this. So 80% of our serotonin is produced in your gut, and when your microbiome is not healthy, you may have low serotonin, and that can also impact anxiety for sure, and it's also impacting migraines. And interestingly, actually, migraineurs have a high, I mean, most people who are suffering from migraines also suffer from anxiety. So, and that's because the serotonin can get very low. Then HPA axis dysregulation, what's that, right? So I'm going to get a little bit more into this. I have more information on the following slides. But so HPA axis refers to hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And so it's, again, your brain, your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland are situated in your brain. And I think somebody just joined who may not be on mute. If you could put yourself on mute, that would be great. Yeah, basically the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are situated in your brain, and they're kind of your computer center for steering all the hormone activity in your body. And they're communicating to your adrenal glands to release or not release stress hormones. And if that axis gets dysregulated, you're kind of getting stuck in a stress loop. So I also have a scheme that a picture I can show you on the following slide. So it will probably make more sense. But then also nutrient deficiency can actually play a big role. So of course they can be impacted by a poor digestive function, especially if you look at zinc, and yeah, zinc and maybe chromium as well. So the minerals are very important. So you need enough stomach acid to absorb them. And then you also basically, if you're low in zinc, you will probably also be low in vitamin B12, and you will actually miss intrinsic factor that's a byproduct for gastric juices, so that you need to break down your nutrients. So it's kind of all working together. And then there's amino acids. So basically most of these nutrients you will get from poultry, dairy products, eggs, oysters are very high in zinc, meat products as well, but also there's pumpkin seeds are the only vegetarian, great vegetarian source of zinc actually. And then then there's vitamin B3, B6, B12, DHA, EPA, and AA. Those are all fatty acids. They're really important for, these are all nutrients that are really important for brain health. So DHA and EPA are both fatty acids that you can mainly find in fish. And arachidonic acid is an omega-3 polyunsaturated acid that you can find in poultry, for instance, and many foods actually. Yeah, and then glutathione is actually an enzyme that your body is producing, but you can be low in it because it's basically your master enzyme that's implicated in detoxification. And it can happen that if you have toxicity, or if you have a lot of stress, again, you will be using up a lot of glutathione and magnesium actually as well, and also the vitamin B6 and B12. So those are all, and vitamin C, those are all nutrients that your body is using, let's say, excessively when in a state of stress. So it's kind of hard to actually get everything from the foods that you're eating. So you can actually become deficient in it. And as I said, most of these are all abundant in fish, poultry, dairy products, eggs, and meats. Selenium actually is you have Brazil nuts are a really great source of selenium, and then vitamin C is, of course, more you find in something in fruit and vegetables. But basically, being a vegetarian or a vegan, you can see that in this sense, it may not be beneficial, let's say, for those nutrients that your brain especially needs. And then what also happens is when you go on a vegetarian, or like not vegetarian actually, but more a vegan diet where you really don't have any animal protein products, then you will also reduce the stomach acid production will reduce naturally. So because you mainly need the stomach acid to break down amino acids from meats and fish, basically all the proteins that you eat. And so if you stop consuming them, also your stomach acid production will actually decline, and it's naturally also declining with age. So it will and that will then further impact the absorption of your ability to break down minerals and amino acids. But then what happens in perimenopause is we're actually getting low in progesterone. And I mean, that can also sometimes happen before perimenopause even. You can, I mean, I was definitely deficient in progesterone before perimenopause because there was a lot of stress I was exposed to. So stress will have an impact on your hormone levels. And I will a little bit go into more detail about that as well in the next slides. Then what also may be a root cause is a diet high in refined carbs, or basically high sugars. And you know, if your blood sugar is imbalanced, it's another stressor that comes into your system. Constantly high blood sugar is a constant stress on your brain. It's creating brain fog, and it's basically feeding that kind of stress loop in your brain, and also here with the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Poor methylation can also have an impact, and that's often hereditary. So that's a genetic predisposition that you may have, but it can also it can also come from lifestyle, from having a lot of stress, or having a poor diet. that can definitely affect your body's ability to methylate. And it's basically meaning that your body's ability to use and decompose certain nutrients. So that often concerns mainly the B vitamins, the folate and vitamin B12. So you may have seen that in supplements, that basically most of the supplements that you can buy today will offer methylated vitamin B12 and methylated folate. So it's basically a prepared supplement for your body so that it's able to use it. But if you do have genetically poor methylation and you consume synthetic folate or non-methylated folate or vitamin B12, it will actually just accumulate as a toxin in your body, and your body will not be able to use it. So and that will then again create inflammation in your brain. So it's also something to look into for sure. And I already mentioned toxins. So toxins can be plentiful, of course, in today's world, but yeah, especially mold and heavy metals have an impact on anxiety, but then also oxalates and copper, which are things that we could actually consume from foods. And actually many healthy foods are high in oxalates, especially spinach and beets and chocolate and almonds. So it can really it does have a high effect on people with anxiety, and especially it's been studied with children who are autistic or who have ADHD, who go on a low oxalate diet that has very positive effects on them. And then copper is, of course, something that we can consume in foods, but then also it can actually be in our water, depending on where we live. Often pipes where the water comes through are from copper. So actually your water could be contaminated with copper. But also women, there's also many women who are using copper IUDs as a form of birth control. So basically there's many sources of copper, and it may be, especially women, it seems, often have too high levels of copper. And that may also be linked to, again, genetic predisposition on the way your body is able to detoxify excess nutrients and toxins that come into the body. So, well, that was a breathful, right? That was like a long slide on all kinds of different root causes. So I want to first talk a little bit more about the perimenopause root cause, the low progesterone. Most of you probably know this, but if you don't, progesterone is the first hormone that will naturally decline. So our ovaries are producing our progesterone and our estrogen and also our testosterone up until we get into menopause. So what happens in perimenopause is it's basically the time leading up to menopause. And for some women, that will be maybe 14 years. And for me, it definitely started very early, and it can be very subtle, and you may actually not experience much symptoms in the beginning. And some women can actually go until 48 or 50 until they feel something, and then they just get a big bam with all the symptoms, and all of a sudden they're in menopause. So everyone is different in that sense, but what's the same for everyone is the first hormone that our ovaries will stop producing is progesterone, and that can have very subtle effects on just not sleeping so well anymore, the cycle getting a little bit shorter, getting more PMS, It can also cause hormonal migraines. Yeah, so it can actually be subtle, and it may not be with every cycle that we have. So it may not be something that you actually notice first. But progesterone is our Zen hormone. So if we're lacking progesterone, we will feel the effect in a sense of being less relaxed, less Zen, especially in that luteal phase, the second phase of our cycle. So that's when progesterone is supposed to be high, or at its highest. And that's when we will feel those effects. And that's why in perimenopause, many women, when the progesterone is declining, they get more anxiety, or it gets worse than before. So that's the explanation there. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the fear cycle that I mentioned, and explain a little bit more also with graphics how that works in the brain. So basically, we have it's the thalamus, which is part of our prefrontal cortex, although it's kind of located in the middle. That's really our kind of reasoning part of the brain. So it's kind of the cognitive, the decision making, the logical part of the brain is really this prefrontal cortex here, and the thalamus is part of that. And the thalamus actually plays a major role in signaling to all the other parts of the brain. So the thalamus is communicating to the hippocampus, and that's communicating to the amygdala, and it's basically creating like a cycle of communication. And I mean, those are not the only parts, but those are basically the main parts that are impacted here, because the amygdala are really linked to anxiety. So the amygdala is kind of our emotional part of the brain, where we're kind of, where we're reacting to emotional responses. And that's also where we then kind of get stuck in this fear or anxiety, or also fight or flight response. And that's also when sometimes when you get really worked up, or you get really nervous or anxious, you get even like a panic attack. In those moments, you cannot, I mean, if you would be able to actually access the cognitive part of your brain, you could explain everything, and you could just tell yourself, well, that it's actually silly what I'm thinking right now, because it's just not possible that this will happen. I mean, you could actually kind of, discuss it out and tell yourself, well, that's silly. No, calm down. But if you're kind of getting stuck into this fear cycle, you're not able to actually access that part of the brain, and that's why it's so hard to actually get out of this kind of an anxiety attack at that time. So I just wanted to share this because I found it really interesting to actually, I always like to understand how things work in the brain. And most of I've been really obsessed with studying the brain and kind of understanding how all these things work. So I just always find it's better to know what you're dealing with, right? So that the next time you may actually be able to explain it better, or say, yeah, it's my amygdala. It may actually make you laugh, or yeah. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the stress and the fight or flight response. So yeah, actually, I already said all this. So we can move on to the next picture, where we actually go into how stress especially also affects our hormone and this kind of fight or flight situation that I mentioned before, right? So this is the picture that I mentioned in the beginning, where you see actually the hypothalamus. So you see here is your hippocampus, and you see your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland. And as I said before, they are kind of your computer centers. So the hypothalamus is really the computer center that relays always the information to the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary gland is the one communicating with the other endocrine glands in your body, like your pancreas to release insulin, your thyroid to release thyroid hormone, the adrenal glands to secrete cortisol or adrenaline or noradrenaline, and to the ovaries to secrete your sex hormones, like the testosterone and the progesterone and the estrogens. So you can actually see that everything is always steered from the brain. So when your brain is kind of in stress mode and occupied, let's say, with more important things, because any stressor, your brain doesn't make a difference between stressors. So if if you just run into a wall and you get, you kind of get like a physical stress, like a punch or something, or if you're just sitting at your desk and you're receiving an email that makes you feel really upset, to your brain it's just all stress. There's no difference between those things. And so it's just working with that information. And, when there's a stressor, your brain is taught, or your brain is there to keep you safe and to manage that situation. So basically what happens then is it will kind of deprioritize all the other tasks that are going on. So no sex hormone production, no thyroid hormone production, but it will definitely tell your adrenal glands to produce cortisol, because cortisol is released to counter the stress, and it's also a hormone that's secreted to mitigate an inflammation response in your body. So if you get hit by something, or if you get stung by a bee or something like that, that's all basically triggering a cortisol response. It's basically mounting your immune system, kind of your defense mechanism, saying, okay, I'm here, I'm there to fight off whatever the invader is, what's going on. So it's your defense. And you can understand that producing a little bit of progesterone or estrogen, it's not so important. So that's kind of how it works. And I hope that makes sense. So when your HPA system, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal system, becomes dysfunctional, your adrenals can actually start to overproduce cortisol. And then also, I said the adrenal glands are also producing epinephrine, which is actually adrenaline, and norepinephrine, which is noradrenaline. So, it's basically producing those hormones that are supposed to balance each other out. But then when the communication kind of gets, when it's always triggering to produce cortisol, you can actually become cortisol resistant, as the same as you can become insulin resistant when you're having constantly high blood sugar. So and that's when basically the communication kind of gets out of whack or offline, and when you get stuck in this survival mode. And and as I said, that's when it's basically your brain kind of deprioritizing other functions, because it's focusing on survival. And basically having high cortisol is also something that's generally linked to anxiety, because you have a lot of stress. But it can, and it affects definitely your sleep. But as I said, hormone production will be prioritized. So it can affect fertility and in general hormonal balance, and it often will lead to weight gain. So if you have constant high levels of cortisol, that can actually have a high impact on the other hormone levels, or the levels of the other hormones that are not being produced in your body. So what can you do against anxiety? Oh, there's somebody still coming in, coming right at the right time, you know, just just skipping through all the blah blah, but getting right to the what can you do about it. That's efficient. So welcome. Yeah, I have this slide where I mentioned all the different triggers of anxiety, or what can be the root causes. So really, I always start with the gut. So if you have parasites or other pathogens overgrowing in your gut, that's definitely the first thing you wanna address. And also you want to make sure you don't have any food sensitivities, because they can also create high inflammation and exacerbate anxiety in that sense. So you can see that actually any type of stress or inflammation will impact the secretion of stress hormones, will impact your brain, will inflame your brain, and will lead to anxiety. That's kind of the logic here, right? But then, yeah, we're talking about stress. So of course we want to reduce stressors as much as possible. And then there's different types of stressors. So it's your blood sugar. Oh, actually somebody wants to speak. Yeah, you can just unmute yourself and speak actually, or should I go do that? Or was it maybe a mistake? Let me check. Maybe that was a mistake. Well, if you want to say something, just go ahead. You can unmute yourself and just talk if you want to. So I'm not sure. I will just continue for now until somebody interrupts me. So yeah, so one of the stresses I said is high blood sugar. So you want to make sure that you keep your blood sugar stable. So that's something that you control with your diet, but it's also something that the blood sugar can be impacted as well by gut dysbiosis or other inflammation. So sometimes, I mean, the first thing is, of course, look into your diet, but if that doesn't help and your blood sugar is still high, it may actually be from other systemic infections that are in your body. But something that you can for sure do is avoid plastics. That's such a big one, right? That's all the plastic we're touching everywhere every day, and it's thankfully it's getting less, also for sake of not only for our sake but also for the sake of the environment. But you may not have known that actually the tickets you get at the register, the ink that's used in those tickets is highly estrogenic as well. So, and that's the same issue with plastics, right? That it does have the same molecular structure than estrogens. And by just touching it and absorbing it from our skin, or eating foods that have been stored in plastics, we're basically getting exogenous hormones, or, well, actually not hormones, but we're getting hormone-like substances in our body, and that can definitely affect our hormone balance for sure, because our body is thinking that we have estrogen in our blood. So I mean, that your brain thinks, okay, well, there's already estrogen, so well, maybe I'm not going to tell the ovaries to produce estrogen now, because we already have so much estrogen. So that can definitely throw off your hormone balance, and it's definitely a toxin that's coming in. Look into what kind of body care and cleaning products you're using. What's your washing detergent? Opt for clean products there, and also, I mean, don't throw away everything you have from one day to the other, right? Just do this gradually. When the next time you're going for something to buy a new bottle of shampoo, just maybe opt for a natural one the next time. Let me just see if I can unmute. Yeah. Eat organic and whole foods where possible. So the whole foods are also very important for the blood sugar. Usually, the less packaged things you eat, the less added sugars or preservatives or filling agents or whatever you will find in your food. So that's good for your blood sugar, but it's also it's also good to just stay away from processed foods. And then be mindful of, even organic food does have pesticides to some extent, but eating organic is, I guess, the best choice for staying away from pesticides. Also consider that I mean, here in Europe we're not that much affected by glyphosate yet, but in the US it's a big problem, and glyphosate actually acts like you could also just eat antibiotics every day. It's the same effect on your microbiome, so it really has a disastrous effect on your microbiome. And there again you come to gut dysbiosis, maybe parasites and all these things. So it's really important to also be mindful of that. And I don't think anyone can be perfect, or don't like overdo it, but it's just, I'm just listing these things here to open up a conversation, so you can actually consider and think, oh, maybe it's something that I could do, or or maybe you have been doing it already, so that's great. For me, it was a big one as well. I also said possibly avoid oxalates, or make sure that, I mean, I'm still consuming oxalates because so many healthy foods are high in oxalates. But there was actually a time where I was having a smoothie every morning with almond milk or almond flour and spinach leaves. And then I also had blueberries in it, which are high in silicic acid. So basically I was thinking, wow, I'm having this healthy smoothie, it's so great. And I was just getting in a concentration of oxalates and silicic acid, and was just wondering, why am I not feeling better? I'm doing all these great things for my health. So sometimes it's just a matter of if you had, maybe don't eat as much spinach, or don't eat it as often, or mix it with other foods. Or if you have spinach, then don't have beets and almonds and chocolate on the same day. It may be too much. So that's just a way of also looking into these things. Then for me, a big one was also don't over exercise. I mean, I was that kind of person who thought that, well, if you don't exercise, like if you don't like sweating excessively, and you haven't exercised on full speed for an hour, it's not exercise. And at one point I was actually, I did actually, also by reading and listening to podcasts and reading on things, I was like, well, actual exercise actually also is a stressor on the body. So it can also sometimes be too much. And I actually, at one point I was feeling so unwell that I actually almost wasn't able to exercise. So I was naturally scaling down. But I'm just really trying to not overdo it anymore. And that's, I think, also something that as we get older, it's better to actually opt for different forms of exercise that are beneficial for us. So do more weight training, do Pilates and yoga, and maybe go for a run from time to time, or do walks in nature. And this is probably all better for stress levels than doing high intensity training. And I mean, if you feel good doing them, it's definitely, I don't want to encourage you to do that. So I think it's always, your body will tell you if you feel good doing something, then just continue doing it. It's just, I'm just raising a point for you to consider. Probably something that everyone at our age can look at is kind of setting boundaries and eliminating possibly toxic relationships. So if you feel drained every time you spoke to a specific friend, or you've seen that friend, or if you basically have a hard time saying no to people and setting those boundaries, that will really, actually, it will just hurt you on the long run. You will be the one who feels bad after that, not the other people, right? So I think it's an important thing to learn, especially since so many women are just there to always take care of the kids and everyone else but themselves. I think this is really the time to start taking care of yourself, because in this time of transition where we go through these hormonal changes, your body really needs all the love and care it can get, so you can actually get through this transition the best way possible. And then in general, it's just not possible to eliminate stress, but you will always have stress, right? If you have a job, if you have kids, if you have an active life, there will always be stress of some sort there, and it's not possible to just completely ignore it and be happy all the time and be always relaxed and zen. No, I mean, it's not possible. But what's important is that we all just learn how to mitigate that stress response, and that our brain doesn't get stuck in this stress fear cycle, right? So incorporating stress management techniques is maybe something that I had a lot of trouble in the beginning to get access to that. But it's really important to do it consistently. And even if it's just 5 minutes every day, that's really better than doing it just from time to time. So the consistent application is really beneficial. Yes, you're welcome. Oops. So getting back to my almost last slide. So what else can you do against anxiety? Detoxification, because I mean, as I just said, there's so many toxins actually that we're exposed to every day. We can't possibly also all eliminate them, as much as we cannot just be happy and zen 100%. So I mean, we just live in a pretty toxic world today, and of course it's great if we can all look into our own home and see where we can minimize them, but also supporting our body with gentle detoxification support is maybe not even on a daily basis, but maybe you want to do it a couple of times per month. But doing some self-care, like going into an infrared sauna, or I actually invested into an infrared sauna blanket that I use at home, doing castor oil packs on your liver, using essential oils. So just using essential oils like lemon or grapefruit, for instance, are both great for detoxification. So if you can actually take them, so lemon can be taken up to 3 drops 2 times per day, for instance, in a little bit of water, or with a little bit of olive oil, for instance. So you would typically take that in the morning and before going to bed, so that will really help your liver. And so those are some things that you can do. But if you use essential oils, please, depending on which brand you buy, always make sure that they are allowed to take to be consumed, because not all oils are the same quality. And of course, you want to also make sure they are organic, so you don't actually get pesticides in your oils, where they will be very highly concentrated as well. So those are some things that you can do for detox. I also like to use a parasympathetic blend from Vibrant Blue Oils. So it's actually clove and distilled lime essential oil in a carrier oil, and I rub that here behind my earlobe. That's the mastoid bone, and that really basically helps access the vagus nerve and helps with relaxation and getting your body back into a parasympathetic state. So Vibrant Blue Oils is actually a brand that you can buy in the US. So they have those ready mixes. But as I said, you could also just buy a bottle of each, clove and distilled lime oil. And always make sure you use a carrier oil that can be coconut or just olive oil. So you will basically just put a drop of each with a carrier oil, and then rub that on behind your ears, for sure. So those are some easy things that you can do. Maybe also just make it a ritual before going to bed, or Epsom salt baths are also great, or just doing an Epsom salt foot soak. That's also really great for relaxation before bed, and it's also a great detoxification support. And then, so what we're going to do about those hormones, right? In perimenopause and also menopause. So there's some herbs that are great for boosting progesterone, like chaste tree. Not all women do well with it. So I've had some clients who actually didn't have good results with it. And then you also want to consider the cofactors. So for progesterone, I actually didn't list zinc here, I forgot that. But you also want to have vitamin B6 and magnesium and zinc. They're all very important for progesterone production, besides the proteins from the amino acids from protein. But yeah, chaste tree can be great for some, so you might want to try it. And usually, I mean, depending on where you are in perimenopause, you can probably have great results with it. I'm actually personally, although I'm not that old yet, I'm actually already taking bioidentical progesterone, and I'm not taking that like every day. I'm just taking it really the last 5 days of my cycle because I did test my hormones and they were very, very low. So and yeah, basically I definitely appreciate my sleep much better than when I'm taking the progesterone. I basically see that I can sleep much better, and I'm also much more relaxed, and I don't get all these irritability and all the PMS basically that come with low progesterone or too high estrogen, right? So yeah, you can basically try to boost progesterone naturally. The first thing to boost your progesterone is reducing stress. But then also the chaste tree is great, as I said, and vitamin B6, zinc, magnesium, those are basically the basic nutrients your body needs for progesterone. And you may actually also consider bioidentical hormone therapy. So there's something, for those who don't know this, there's something that's called bioidentical hormone therapy. And that's not the same as hormone therapy, which is using synthetic hormones. So bioidentical hormones are usually made from yam root or from cactus trees. And they do have the exact same molecular structure than the hormones that your body is producing. So they are bioidentical. And they don't come with all the negative side effects or negative health effects that synthetic hormones bring. And I've had several clients lately who actually were still using hormonal IUD that did have synthetic progesterone, but they did have high anxiety. They weren't sleeping. They had all the symptoms of low progesterone, although they still had the IUD that was giving up the synthetic progesterone. So that for me was just the main proof that the synthetic hormones, even though you have them, they will definitely prevent you not from getting pregnant, but they are not the same than what your body is used to, and you may actually take the synthetic hormones but still get symptoms or not get rid of your symptoms. So yeah, and bioidentical hormone therapy is actually it depends on where you live, but you just need to find the right doctor. I mean, I do have access to recommending topical products, oils, and creams that you can use on your skin to absorb. But basically, if you wanna take them in form of a pill, or I often actually send my clients to see their doctors and get a prescription for those bioidentical hormones. And then sometimes that's not a problem at all. And sometimes doctors will actually will be very worried about the health risks, because they actually don't know the difference between bioidentical and synthetic hormones. So I just wanted to mention this here and tell you a little bit about it. So, this it's something that exists everywhere. It does exist in Europe, in the US, and I mean, every country and every continent kind of have their own approach to this, but it's probably best that, when you know what you want and that it exists, it's a much better conversation to also have with your doctor, to get access to it or to get a prescription for something like that. Yeah, so that's basically everything from my side today. I'm just going to open up now for questions if you want to ask anything or have any remarks. So these are my contact details for anyone who wants to follow along on Instagram, or maybe join, if you haven't, my Facebook group, Holistic Health for Women, or my website or my email if you just want to get in touch. I'm going to stop the recording now and the screen share, and then if somebody wants to ask a question, we can have a chat. I see Valentina actually had problems coming in and out. Let me stop the recording now. Sorry, it's taking a while. Stop.